Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. Welcome to the next class of CS131 Discrete Structures, where we will be talking about trees, and in particular the spanning trees, which is section 11.4 of your book. So far, we have discussed the concept of graphs in the previous chapter, and then we were talking about trees in this chapter, where I introduced the concept of trees to you in the first section. As well as the applications of trees included in the that was basically the second section, but included in the first lecture of the series. Then I talked about tree traversal and tree traversal techniques, the in-order, the pre-order, the post-order techniques, and in particular their applications through in-fix, post-fix, and prefix ways or notations of particular expressions. And I talked about those applications from the point of view of computer science, but as well as from the side of how they are actually being performed. So those are some of the topics that we've discussed so far. Now I need to talk about spanning trees, and that is a topic of the current lecture. So what are spanning trees, how they are used, and what are the different applications will be the topic of this particular session. So what are spanning trees? And this is again basically section 11.4 of your book. So I'll just move on with what are spanning trees. So the concept is really simple. Let G be a simple graph. So let G be a simple graph as shown over here. A spanning tree of G is a subgraph of G such that it is a tree that contains every vertex of G. So it should contain every vertex, but it is a tree. So any tree that is derived from a graph, from a simple graph, is what we call a spanning tree. So for example, and how do you do that? Well, you can remove some edges so that the result is a tree. Note that a tree is nothing, but it is a graph such that it does not contain any loops, right? So it is a simple, it is an ordered graph. It contains a root, and it's a directed graph such that it does not contain any of the loops, right? So no cycles. And in this case, what you need to do is you might remove the edge AE so that this cycle is broken. Then in the second case, you can remove the edge EF so that this cycle is broken. And finally, you want to remove maybe CG, this edge, so that this cycle is broken. And the result now is a tree. This is a tree that is obtained from a main graph, a simple graph like G is basically what is the spanning tree of G. So this is the spanning tree. This is the spanning tree of G obtained by removing 3 edges from G. So note that the tree shown earlier on is not the only spanning tree of G. Of course, you can have multiple spanning trees by removing any of these edges, and these are all possibly the spanning trees of G. So the first theorem is that a simple graph is connected if and only if it has a spanning tree. And of course, if a simple graph is said to be connected if and only if it has a spanning tree. If it has a spanning tree, then automatically the simple graph is also connected, because it's an if and only if. And there are various applications of spanning trees. In particular, you'll find spanning trees to play an important role in multicasting in internet protocol IP networks. When you study the course of networks, you'll find that the spanning trees, the term spanning trees, and the algorithms related to spanning trees will be studied in a lot of different applications over there. So that's one way that I'm showing. So to send data from a source computer to multiple receiving computers, each of which is a subnetwork, data could be sent separately to each computer. So that's the first and the foremost application, where the thing that we do is that to send data from one source computer to multiple receiving computers, one of them could be that data should be sent as separately to each computer. However, this is this type of networking, which we call unicasting, is inefficient because many copies of the same data will be transmitted over the network to multiple places, right? So from a source to multiple subnetworks, you need to send multiple copies. And if you send one copy to each network, that is what we call unicasting, and it's inefficient. So to make the transmission of data to multiple receiving computers more efficient, maybe we can use the concept of IP multicasting. And with IP multicasting, a computer sends a single copy of data over the network, and as data reaches intermediate routers, the data are forwarded to one or more other routers so that ultimately all receiving computers in their various subnetworks receive these data. And it is actually a single copy of data that is being sent. However, it is being transmitted over to or maybe copied in on the way and sent, or the copies are being sent to the multiple receiving computers. So for data to each receiving computers to reach receiving computers as quickly as possible, there should be no cycles in the path that data take through the networks. Of course, if there's a cycle, then maybe multiple copies will be made. Maybe the copies will be, moving around in the same cycle. So to avoid that, there must be no cycles in the path that data take through the network. That is, once the data have reached a particular router, data should never return to this router. So that if the data has passed through a router, it should never reach back to the same router. So to avoid cycles, the multicast routers use network algorithms to construct a spanning tree in the graph. So in the graph, whatever the connections they have, they usually construct a spanning tree using network algorithms, and that has a multicast source, the routers, and the subnetworks containing receiving computers as vertices, with edges representing the links between computers and or routers. So it's basically a graph again. And the root of this spanning tree is the multicast source, the source which generates this particular data. Subnetworks containing receiving computers are leaves of the tree. So that all the subnetworks that contain the receiving computers are leaves of the tree. And this is how the thing looks after this is the original IP network. And if you convert it to a multicast spanning tree, this is the final result of converting it into a spanning tree. So how do you construct spanning trees? Well, instead of constructing spanning trees by removing edges, spanning trees can be built up by successfully adding edges. And this is kind of the difference between the top down and the bottom up approach. In one approach, you can start from top and go down. And in the other way, you can actually start from bottom and move up. So basically this is done by successively adding edges to the spanning tree and move on. So there are two main methods by which we can successively add edges to build spanning trees. One is what we call the depth first search, and the other is what we call the breadth first search. These two search techniques are basically the cornerstones of many different data types. In particular, you will be talking about them in a lot more detail, in a lot more application oriented manner in the course that we call Data Structures and Algorithms, which is going to be your third course in this series. So the first course, of course, is going to be computer programming that you're studying. The second course is going to be object-oriented programming. And the third one is going to be data structures and algorithms, where you'll be getting these depth first techniques and breadth first techniques from the implementation point of view. In this course, this is just the method which is there, and you need to know how to apply this method. So what is depth first search? First, we form a rooted tree, and then the spanning tree will be the underlying undirected graph of this rooted tree, right? So arbitrarily choose a vertex of the graph as the root. So we choose one vertex of the graph as its root. We form a path starting at this vertex by successively adding vertices and edges, where each new edge is incident with the last vertex in the path and a vertex not already in the path. So we include the last vertex in the path, and we add a vertex to it which was not already in the path, because if it's already in the path, then it's not a tree anymore. If it is not in the path, then we can add it. We continue adding vertices and edges to this path as long as possible. So we take the path, and the same path goes down and down and down and down. We keep on trying to add vertices and edges to this path as long as possible. And if the path goes through all vertices of the graph, the tree consisting of this path is a spanning tree. And once all the vertices have been used, the tree that we get as a result of this is what we call a spanning tree. However, if the path does not go through all vertices, more vertices and edges must be added. And we then, in that case, what we need to do is we might need to move back to the next to the last vertex in this path, and if possible, form a new path starting at this vertex, passing through vertices that were not already added in the next path or in the current path. And otherwise, we would again go back one step, move to the third last, and continue this until the two vertices back in the path and try again. And we need to continue this until we have beginning at the last vertex visited, moving up back up the path one vertex at a time, forming new paths that are as long as possible until no more edges can be added. And finally, because the graph has a finite number of edges and is connected, this process ends with the production of a spanning tree. This guarantees the production of a spanning tree. Each vertex that ends a path at a stage of the algorithm will be a leaf in the rooted tree, and each vertex where a path is constructed starting at this vertex will be an internal vertex. Depth first search is also called backtracking because the algorithm returns to the previous vertices visited previously and to add to further paths. And here's an example. So here's is a graph, and let's say that we start at the vertex F. So we start over at vertex F. We visit the vertices in that order G, H, K, and J. So this is one of the tracks, right? So we visited vertex G, H, K, and J. So this is the ones that are circled here have already been visited, and we don't need to maybe visit them again. We note that the path that we taken, basically the new vertex that gets added is basically not the vertex that was not visited in this path. So once you reach J, you climb back to K and see if another option is possible. There is no option possible. You move a step back, you move to H. Is another path possible? Yes, there is one possible with I. So here we can add the vertex I in this. And now this is also used, right? So now, and from I, we don't have any more paths. However, all vertices have not been visited. So we move a step back to H again. Is a third path possible? No. We move back to G, a third path possible. Another path possible? No. We move back to F, another path possible? Yes. Now you can visit, basically when you visit back to F, now you've got the possibility of visiting D, E, C, and A. So now from F you move to D, right, using this path. Then from D you use this path to visit E. From E you visit C, and from C you visit A, and from A no path is possible anymore. So once you reach A, then you backtrack to C. Is another path possible? Yes, to B, and once that is possible, you actually add B, and this is the resulting spanning tree using the depth first search technique. The algorithm is very simple here. I'm not going to go into detail here, but you need to know how to apply it like you did in the previous step. The procedure is that for depth first search, where G, it takes as input a G, which is a connected graph with vertices V1 up till Vn. So the result is basically that we want to construct a tree T that consists only of the vertex V1. So we start with the first vertex, then we visit V1 again. And what is the visit procedure? The visit procedure is very simple. This is the recursive procedure that actually draws up the depth first search, uses that technique to come up with the corresponding underlying spanning tree. And the visit procedure takes as vertex a vertex V of G for each vertex W that is adjacent to V and not yet in T. So there are two things here. You need to check that each vertex W is adjacent to V and it has not been added in T. We add the vertex W and edge VW to T, and then we visit the vertex W now, and we keep on doing it. Notice the order here. First we add the vertex, then we visit the vertex, right? So then this goes on until basically there's no vertex that has been left out, and that's when this is going to end. And the final result T is the tree that will contain our results, and that is being built along the way. So the complexity of DFS, I'm going to explain it now, but I think you'll be able to understand it better once you have gone through the chapter 3. The key observation is that for each vertex V, the procedure visit V is called again, and the vertex V is first encountered in the search and it is not called again. So if something is encountered once, it will not be called again. So assuming that the adjacency lists for G are available, if we have the adjacency list, no computations are required to find the vertices adjacent to G, or to V. And as we follow the steps of the algorithm, we examine each edge at most twice to determine whether to add this edge and one of its endpoints to the tree. Consequently, the procedure DFS constructs a spanning tree using big O of E or big O of N square steps, where E and N are the number of edges and vertices in G respectively. So this is going to be a polynomial expression, and it's going to work in either big O of N square or the number of edges, which are twice the number of edges big O of E. So what are the different applications of depth first search? Well, depth first search can be used as a basis for algorithms that solve many different problems. For example, it can be used to find paths and circuits in a graph. It can be used to determine the connected components of a graph, and it can be used to find the cut vertices of a connected graph. And these are all the topics that we discussed in the chapter 10 when I was talking about graphs. Depth first search is the basis of backtracking techniques used to search for solutions of computationally difficult problems. For example, when you are studying artificial intelligence in AI, a lot of backtracking algorithms do exist. And we'll discuss that in detail in AI as well. So that's a course for your sixth semester, and that is where it is very handy as well. An alternate to depth first search is what we call the breadth first search. We can also produce a spanning tree of a simple graph by using the breadth first search. Again, a rooted tree will be constructed, and the underlying undirected graph of this rooted tree forms the spanning tree. So we arbitrarily choose a root from the vertex of the graph, then add all edges adjacent incident to this vertex. So this is where we are different. In the earlier on, we were adding we were adding just one vertex, and we were just taking up the next connection and making sure that we are not repeating a vertex. In this case, actually, what we do is we add all edges incident to this vertex. Then the new vertices added at this stage become the vertices at level 1 in the spanning tree. Arbitrarily, we order them. Then we basically next, for each vertex at level 1 visited in order, add each edge incident to this vertex to the tree as long as it does not produce a simple circuit. So we do not want to produce a simple circuit, and as long as that is not happening, as long as we're not adding an edge that is going to previously visited node, we are going to be just fine. So then we arbitrarily order the children of each vertex at level 1. This produces the vertices at level 2 in the tree, and then we follow the same procedure until all the vertices in the tree have been added. The procedure ends because there are only a finite number of edges in the graph, and hence a spanning tree is produced because we have produced a tree containing every vertex of the graph. So for example, let's take this particular graph for our example. And here we start with vertex E. So vertex E is here, right? In the first step, you add 4 vertices, this one, and this one, and this one, as its first 4 children here. So those are the first 4 children. This is for level 1. Then for each of these vertices, you add new children as long as they are not being used by another vertex. So for example, for the vertex B, you can add A and C. So once A and C have been added, we cannot use A and C in any other vertex. For D now, A has already been taken, so only H is added. For F now, C has been taken, so now J can be added, right? And for I, since H, J have been taken, I can only work with K. So that is the next level. And then for each of these children, we actually move on from A, for example, we cannot use D or B since they are already introduced with E, so that will produce a circuit, so they're not used. So these have already been used. And then that means that for A, actually, there's no child that is further possible. Similarly, for C, no further child is possible. Then we talk about H. H again has no further child possible. However, for the next level, which is basically G, and G is the vertex over, G is basically, where is G? G is basically the vertex over here, right? So G is also taken. So from F, you can actually visit G or J. So G is taken. From G, you can actually go to L. So that's one possibility from G to L. Similarly, from K, you can go to M. And at this point, you visited all vertices, and this is your underlying spanning tree using the breadth first technique. Notice that if you had used a depth first technique, that would have produced a different spanning tree as compared to the breadth first search. But both are absolutely fine. And in this case, I think the main thing here is that the algorithm is slightly different from the depth first search, where the input again is a graph G with vertices V1, V2, and Vn. So in this case, we construct a tree that only contains the vertex V1, and we construct a list L, which is empty. So we put V1 in the list L of unprocessed vertices. So while L is not empty, we remove the first vertex V from L. We then, for each neighbor W of V, if W is not in the list L already and not in tree as well, so it has neither been used in the tree, not in the list L, we then add W to the end of the list L, and we add W as well as the edge VW to the tree as well. And we keep on doing this until basically the list L becomes empty finally. So if we compare both of them, well, they are very similar procedures, except that this one is a recursive procedure, and this one we can basically are solving using an iterative in an iterative manner. So both of them will produce slightly different results. So, but let's say if we talk about complexity of breadth first search, for each vertex V in the graph, we examine all vertices adjacent to V and we add each vertex not yet visited to the tree T. Assuming that we have the adjacency list for the graph available, again, no computation is required to determine which vertices are adjacent to a graph, to a given vertex. As in the analysis of depth first search algorithm, we see that we examine each edge at most twice to determine whether we should add this edge and its endpoint not already in the tree. Hence, it follows that the breadth first search algorithm has a big O of E or big O of n square steps in total, and this is equivalent to the depth first search. The breadth first search is one of the most useful algorithms in graph theory. In particular, it can serve as a basis of algorithms that solve a wide variety of problems. For example, algorithms that find the connected components of a graph, that determine whether the graph is bipartite, and that find the path with the fewest edges between two vertices in a graph can all be built using breadth first search. So, so far we have already talked about searching in undirected graphs. So there is something that we can also do for searching in a directed graph. And what we can do is we can easily modify both the depth first search and the breadth first search so that they can run given a directed graph as input. However, the output will not necessarily be a spanning tree, but rather a spanning forest, because in some directions it might not be possible, and hence the result could not be the result for a spanning tree was the result for an undirected graph was a spanning tree. The result might be a spanning forest for a directed graph. So in both algorithms, we can add an edge only when it is directed away from the vertex that is being visited and to a vertex not yet added. If at a stage of either algorithm, we find that no edge exists starting at a vertex already added to one not yet added, the next vertex added by the algorithm becomes the root of a new tree in the spanning forest. For example, what is the output of depth first search given the graph G as input? So let's say if this is the graph at input and we need to start at a point, let's say we start at A, and this is a depth first search. So A to B, B to basically C, right? And from C to G, and then there's nowhere else that we can go. So we have used A, B, C, and G. So from G, we move back a step. Is there a path possible for C? No. Is there a path possible from B? Yes. Now we go to F, from F to E. And again, there is no path that is possible here. So we move back ultimately to A. And this is kind of the first thing. Then we take another node, which is basically D that was taken. So let's take D, D to H, H to L, L to K, K to J, and over here we also reach an endpoint where no other path is possible, and again in this whole path no other node can be visited, and finally you've got the node I. So this produces a spanning forest here with these directions, and this is slightly different. So search in directed graph is the basis of many algorithms. Again, it can be used to determine whether a directed graph has a circuit. It can be used to carry out a topological sort of a graph. It can also be used to find the strongly connected components of a directed graph. A particular application is the web crawlers designed by search sites such as Google and Yahoo, which can index sites using breadth first or depth first strategy, whatever they feel like. So that brings us to an end towards the section 11.4, which was about spanning trees. In the next section, now we'll talk about the minimum spanning trees. So what we've talked so far is that spanning trees are trees that are basically built from the underlying undirected graphs, right? And if you get a tree from a graph, from a simple graph, then that tree is what we call a spanning tree. And it can also be done for a directed graph as well as for undirected graphs. In case of a directed graph, however, it may result in a spanning forest instead of a spanning tree. For an undirected graph, undirected connected graph, it will always result in a spanning tree. And we have seen two very strong and important algorithms, the breadth first search algorithm and the depth first search algorithm in this particular lecture, and we've seen how we can apply them to get the underlying trees from underlying spanning trees from a undirected graph, and that is the important part here. In the next chapter now, we'll in the next section now, which is section 11.5, I'll be talking about minimum spanning trees, and two of the main algorithms that we'll study in this particular part are the Kruskal's algorithm and the Prim's algorithm, to study the minimum spanning trees. And that is also going to be the last topic for the chapter 11 trees. So with that, I wish you all the best, and I hope you've understood the concepts of spanning trees. I hope to see you in the next lecture, and take care. Allah Hafiz.